Hello, and welcome to Left to Their Own Devices. I'm Kate Meyer. I am one of the 8 MLTI ambassadors. And when I am not an MLTI ambassador, I am an English teacher and a design thinking teacher at Mount Desert Island High School in Bar Harbor.
And I'm Jonathan Warner. I'm another of the 8 ambassadors. My work is typically at Cape Elizabeth Middle School in Cape Elizabeth, Maine, where I am a tech integrator for that building. And the two of us are senior ambassadors. We're in our second year of work with the program and are joined now by one more senior ambassador and 5 junior ambassadors. For all of us, we wanted to just give you a brief overview of our program. The first area of focus is working to support digital citizenship efforts, information literacy, rights and responsibilities, and safety and security, of course, what we're talking about today. We support technology integration for applications of digital tools, implementation models, and selection of digital tools, and then digital instructional design, anything to do with student engagement or remote and hybrid learning or synchronous and asynchronous learning. So as you're listening today, if you feel like the content we're talking about would be helpful to support work you're doing in your buildings, we'd love to do that work and just reach out to us. If there are other areas that I just covered that you'd like to take a look at with your staff or your faculty, we'd love to support that as well. So, over the past year of working together, Kate and I have distilled our shared perspectives into a collection of core beliefs that have become central to our advocacy for digital citizenship education. For both of us, any help that we offer to students in navigating their online lives has to be grounded in empathy. It needs to stay focused on helping kids utilize technology in more effective and mindful ways. For us, that empathetic focus is closely paired with the idea of empowerment. That is, not trying to control our students, which is impossible, but instead working to give them a sense of authentic agency. Within those two larger themes, we hope to eliminate the temptation of othering our students, of thinking of them as different from us, when in fact, we know our work is a shared mission about a shared experience. And in that same vein, the work of digital citizenship and digital leadership cannot be exclusively teacher-led. As we'll discuss, we must demand to become a shared responsibility if we're going to make effective change. We feel that any model for addressing missteps or unacceptable behavior in the realm of tech use or misuse has to employ a restorative and not a punitive model. We firmly believe that real change also requires community support in every sense of that word, and that we cannot rely on school-only models which end when the bell rings. And finally, we think it's critical to reframe our thinking about our work as educators to move away from the misnomer of experts and towards the concept of co-learners who explore alongside their students. We have 3 goals for today. The first of these is re-examining our perception of how Gen Z experiences technology. Specifically, we want to focus on understanding the internal experiences of Gen Z as they encounter, incorporate, and inhabit their world online. Second, we'll try to help rethink our assumptions about why Gen Z continues to struggle. We know Gen Z is being actively and unconscionably manipulated by big tech, so we'll next turn to understanding those external forces that are at work in our students' lives. And finally, we hope to re-engage ourselves in our school communities in supporting Gen Z's journey toward what we're calling digital ownership. We'll argue that we need to prioritize a new area of competence, digital ownership, where students demonstrate agency through their deep and nuanced understanding of how technology works and how to use it effectively. We'll make the case for giving digital ownership equal status in our districts and at the state level to those more traditional competencies in school, such as math, science, and reading.
As we were planning this presentation, we were struck by an interesting metaphor provided by the book The Hunger Games. If you're not familiar with this text, the 10-second version is this. The Hunger Games is a dystopian novel set in a post-apocalyptic future where children are forced to compete in the Hunger Games, a televised fight to the death. Of course, if you look too closely at our metaphor, you'll find all sorts of holes. So whether or not this analogy works for you, it'll help us frame the story of the cast of characters who are playing and creating the digital ownership game. So let's start here with our Hunger Games metaphors and meet the players, Generation Z. Before we dive into Generation Z, it's just really important to note that the us versus them when it comes to generations is an age-old trope. We need to shift our paradigm of shaming the younger generations to empathizing with them. We can't impose our lens on their world. We have to look through a different lens. It's important to understand our place in time and how both of these things impact how we exist in the world. Generations are one way to group age cohorts. The term generation typically refers to groups of people born over a 15 to 25-year span. According to Pew Research, an individual's age is one of the most common predictors of differences in attitudes and behaviors. Age cohorts give researchers a tool to analyze changes in views over time. They can provide a way to understand how different formative experiences interact to shape people's views of the world. So in front of us as students, we have Generation Z, also known as iGen, or sometimes even Generation K after Katniss Everdeen from the Hunger Games. Gen Z is the youngest, most ethnically diverse, and largest generation in American history, comprising 27% of the US population. Pew Research recently defined Gen Z as anyone born after 1996. Members of Gen Z have little or no memory of the world as it existed before smartphones. They are growing up with technology, the internet, and social media, which sometimes causes them to be stereotyped as tech addicted and antisocial. The average Gen Z member got their first smartphone just before their 12th birthday. They communicate primarily through social media and text and spend as much time on their phones as older generations do watching television. Even though I'm old enough to be a parent of a member of Gen Z, I find myself able to relate to their connection to technology. I'm part of a really interesting microgeneration between Gen X and the millennials, usually called the Zennial generation, but I happen to prefer the Oregon Trail generation. The internet became a household phenomenon when we were in our early teens. It was the perfect age to be able to dig into technology and really explore it and understand it because we weren't burdened with careers or families. We had the time to adopt digital technology in a way that no other generation had the luxury of experiencing. And we existed in two worlds, an analog childhood and an increasingly digital young adulthood. Because of this, while I love digital technology and all we can do with it and all it can do for us, I also very clearly remember what it was like to be 15 and handed access to the internet. And so I have some concerns. And I have a deep sense of responsibility to help lead them through this digital world. Unlike my generation, who had the time to explore the newly emerging digital world, Gen Z is born into a world replete with digital technology. Pew Research notes that they are on the leading edge of entertainment media use. That's what we call social media, which is mainly how they engage with digital tools. However, like my generation, they view their world as existing in a space where they move seamlessly between the physical world and the digital world. So while some adults might view these two spaces as real and fake, Gen Z sees them not only as equal, but as intertwined. In fact, not distinct from one another at all. And they're not just on TikTok doing silly dances. The New York Times recently reported that Gen Z users have begun replacing Google searches with TikTok as their primary search engine, which is a serious issue as at least 1 in 5 search results on TikTok results in sources that contain misinformation. In 2001, Mark Prinsky's article, Digital Natives, Digital Immigrants, was published at almost exactly the same time that my school moved to one-to-one laptops. We grasped onto this theory about our learners as new tech was being introduced into our classrooms. It really gave us comfort that our students were just naturally digital natives. we were presented with the idea of, rather than simply being a new generation of learners, they were considered a whole new mysterious species who were natural users of technology and felt comfortable with it. So they were the natives, and the older generations, we were the immigrants who simply did not know how to speak the language of digital technology. They also just knew how to use things. They could pick up the technology and go. And that they had brains that were wired differently, with an inclination toward just innately understanding how technology works. Now, 20 years later, new data has emerged. Further study shows that differences in how people engage with digital technology is more of a predictor of people being digital natives than simply the generation to which they belong. Digital natives are not a product of generational cohorts, and by saying that they are, we're creating a false divide. Adults and young people can speak the same language of technology and develop the same skills. So we should not lean on this misleading definition of the digital native. Doing so, just as we did in 2001, virtually guarantees that Gen Z is left without any support when it comes to navigating the risks of the internet and digital technology. And really, if digital natives were real, we wouldn't even be having this conversation because they'd be fine. They'd naturally understand how to see scams and bad actors. They would know how to stop cyberbullies and how to use digital tools to advance issues that are important to them. While our students inhabit a digital world, they're not as natural at navigating it as we were first led to believe. As Jonathan and I talked about this, we increasingly came to see the digital world that Gen Z inhabits as a digital wilderness. This is where teenagers who are between the ages of 13 and 18 years old spend 9 hours consuming entertainment media every day, and where tweens who are between the ages of 8 and 12 spend an average of 6 hours a day. And that is not including time spent using media for school or homework. This is up 17% since the start of the pandemic. That's more time online in the digital wilderness than spent with teachers, parents, and other adults. And that's with access to the world's information. Our students are going to have to navigate this wilderness in real time as it expands around them, which means they'll be left to their own devices at some point to make decisions around their use of technology. We cannot justify leaving them in this digital wilderness where their devices are controlling them, leading to a lack of both agency and empowerment. Abandonment in the digital wilderness is not a pedagogical approach. The worst thing we can do is nothing. Yet, there is a way out, and it is our job to help them navigate this wilderness safely. We need not look too far to discover the negative impacts of Gen Z's social media use. The Center for Generational Kinetics conducted a study that gives us these statistics. Gen Z reports that there is a detrimental connection between their social media use and their mental health. From their personal happiness to their self-esteem, it's all under fire. So it's our responsibility then to join together and empower them while they develop their skills to be able to navigate this digital world that they live in with a sense of confidence and empowerment.
As Kate would be the first to say, no amount of analysis of the data or even boundless empathy for teens' experiences can replace hearing directly from Gen Z about what it's like for them to be left to fend for themselves. So as you watch this short video and hear about the wilderness directly from the players, we'd like you to think about how these stories resonate with you in terms of their ability to capture the experience of your students, your own children, yourself, and your colleagues. You may also notice that She Knows, the organization that created this video, has worked for several years with these participants, and we get to see flashbacks as they've grown up in the digital wilderness.
Do you feel addicted to technology?
Yeah.
Yes. I could stop if I wanted to, but I don't want to.
I use my phone 4 hours a day, and Hulu and Instagram are my top used apps, and my mother is gonna kill me. this week was 5 hours. I use my phone for 6 hours a day.
On an average per day on like a weekend, I'd spend 2 hours on my iPad and 3 hours on VR. I play video games, I watch YouTube.
Weekly total is 45 hours and 26 minutes.
44 hours and 3 minutes.
52 hours and 20 minutes. And my most used apps are TikTok and YouTube.
How long on TikTok?
16 hours and 20 minutes, and on YouTube 6 hours and 30 minutes. It's so addictive.
I would say I'm very addicted to VR. I mean, it's a very addicting thing. I talk about it like 24/7.
I've had one of those nights where I'm just like, I need my phone. I need it, I need it, I need it. So I constructed myself this. It's my fake phone. It only has one app, and the app is Grey's Anatomy. So I've just been watching a bunch of Grey's Anatomy on my phone.
I needed my phone to make me feel better just for a minute.
I go down the YouTube rabbit hole a lot, where you just like video and video and video. I don't stay away from it, I embrace it.
I'll just like find myself spending more and more time on TikTok, usually at like 2 a.m.
There's no other way to like entertain myself. Like if
Yeah.
I'm bored, then it's just like, oh, well, my
YouTube.
phone's there, so.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't be able to talk to anyone if I didn't have Snapchat. I'd feel completely isolated.
What people put on their Instagrams isn't like their everyday life. It's like the highlights of their lives. It's the sort of best parts. And when we try to make their highlights our whole lives, it gets kind of like obsessive.
I feel like the amount of likes you get kind of ends up validating whether or not it's a good photo or it looked pretty in the photo.
Other people liking it is like, okay, they like me. I'm okay, I'm good.
I value likes in the same way I like getting compliments. Nobody doesn't want a compliment.
I use my phone a lot as a stress relief because there are a lot of things I have going on in my life.
I don't have to worry about if my friends like or do not like the posts and the social stress that I get.
What's addictive about Instagram is, just it's an endless bowl of soup. You keep going, you keep scrolling.
I feel like I wouldn't have any friends if I didn't have my phone. If nobody else had a phone either, I don't think it would be much of an issue for me. But it's the idea of like me being the only one without social media or me being the only one without a phone and feeling like I'm the weird one.
I'd say that the only real problem is Netflix. But after a week, I've gotten used to not being able to watch it. But I am exercising my restraint, and I guess that's good for me.
I also put a cap on my social media. I thought would be fun, shake things up, so I can only be on Instagram for 1 hour a day. Did this to myself.
Yeah, having social media definitely made me feel bad. I feel like living in a non-digital world is like a lot better than like scouting like your life for like pictures.
If we can identify and name the external forces that are at work, we begin to better understand something our students may not, that this wilderness governing Gen Z's online lives is anything but an organically evolved landscape. It is instead an arena in which our students, and all of us for that matter, are constantly unwitting players. And here's where we come back to our Hunger Games analogy. Like Katniss, Gen Z is relentlessly subjected to the meticulously orchestrated experiments of big tech. To extend our metaphor, these forces are the game makers, the ones who write the rules and craft the landscape. And as Gen Z stumbles and gropes, and as we all do, our missteps are being scrutinized. Then, and this happens at the granular level of the individual user at that particular time of that particular day, each choice we make determines algorithmically where big tech will plant the next landmine. Adam Walter, author of Irresistible, The Rise of Addictive Technology and the Business of Keeping Us Hooked, describes big tech's manipulation as a kind of weaponization of apps and games. As he explains, the game makers run thousands of tests with millions of users to learn which tweaks work and which ones don't, which background colors, fonts, and audio tones maximize engagement and minimize frustration. As an experience evolves, it becomes an irresistible, even weaponized version of the experience it once was. So what does this look like on the ground for us as consumers? First of all, this image on the right shows ways in which the apps that we use, and games in particular, flood us with dopamine. So you'll notice that the young person who's taking the photograph has just won Fortnite, called Victory Royale. And a minute ago, his heart rate was at 174 beats per minute, and now it's at 167 beats per minute, while he is sitting still. If we think about how that would look if we got on our treadmill this evening to try to get our heart rates up to that, it would be pretty difficult. And yet his heart rate, his body is being manipulated to the level that it's as if he's doing exhausting exercise, sitting completely still. A second aspect of this, which you're familiar with, is the concept of streaks, or the gamification of social media apps. So we have these situations where students are sending back and forth ridiculous content, like this picture of a ceiling fan, just to keep streaks going, because they've come to believe that that's important, that it's critical that they keep these streaks exchange back and forth happening constantly. And what they end up doing is foregoing their privacy rights. They'll turn their passwords or their actual devices over to friends when they're not going to be able to continue a streak, just for the purpose of doing that. And we watch them kind of abandon their logic and abandon their normative sensibilities because big tech has given them such a motivation, such a reward for maintaining the streaks that really have obviously no purpose or no reason. Another piece of this that gets really concerning for me is how the social media apps will shape our worldview. And we know from Facebook that one of the aspects of their algorithm is to enhance the clicks that you give that are negative 4 times over ones that are positive. So for example, a news story with a negative bias or some disastrous description is going to give your algorithm 4 times as much influence as something that's a good news story. And in doing that, continually show you more of the same, and as this image points out, give you 11 facts that support your opinion as it already stands. And this only amplifies an existing human tendency, what we call confirmation bias, which is our belief that something that agrees with something we already believe is much more likely to be true than something that challenges us. Even though the news is filled with stories from whistleblowers, we forget in the moment how we're being manipulated. Our teens obviously do the same thing, so let's look at one specific example as a reminder of this. The stated mission of TikTok is to inspire creativity and bring joy. However, TikTok's own internal memo from 2021 detailed the algorithm they use to increase DAU, or daily active users. It's a carefully crafted equation that governs the feed of each individual user, and it is their internally stated mission to increase DAU. As Kate said, with students increasingly using TikTok as their search engine, we need to be arming them with some healthy skepticism about the answers and even that emerge as they conduct their searches. Even more so than with a Google search, the results they get are going to be, by invisible design, profit-driven. And don't be fooled by any recent changes you've seen. These ruthlessly profit-driven forces are what's given rise to the need for digital citizenship education. As Kate and I quickly discovered, digital citizenship education does not mean the same thing for everyone who uses the term. As among the many competing descriptions of digital citizenship that we found, we settled on George Couros' statement that digital citizenship means using the internet and social media in a responsible and ethical way. But the real appeal of Corus's definition was how it dovetailed with his description of digital leadership. That is, using the internet and social media to improve the lives, well-being, and circumstances of others. To quote Koros, this two-pronged approach shifts our focus from the negative connotations around technology to shining a light on how it can empower students and schools to be digital leaders. And the journey toward leadership from citizenship has a very clear entry point. Help students identify a passion and then use that to influence others to make positive changes in that area. It's a terrific entry point that is pretty straightforward and one we can share with students quite readily. Now we come to our radical proposal about how to address this. Even with Koros's pairing of citizenship and leadership, Kate and I still think there's a missing piece. We're calling that missing piece digital ownership, but embracing the model requires that we rethink our goal. What if this journey towards digital responsibility isn't a climb to a destination, but it's a process of taking greater ownership of their own lives, in every sense of that word? If Gen Z's analog and digital spheres are indistinct from one another, then digital ownership becomes just ownership, and our emphasis on teaching these skills becomes all the more imperative. We absolutely agree that citizenship is critical if we think of that term as describing the skills required to interact with tech in healthy, ethical, and responsible ways. And we love the idea of direct instruction that helps students focus on what we do with technology, that is, how we improve the lives, well-being, and circumstances of ourselves and others.
While we work with students on digital citizenship, the goal is that they employ their knowledge automatically whenever they interact with technology. At the same time, we also want students to strategically use their digital leadership skills. And when this all comes together, we posit that it creates a new area of competence called digital ownership, where students demonstrate agency through their deep and nuanced understanding of how technology works and how to use it effectively. Katniss does end up winning the Hunger Games, becoming a symbol of rebellion after defying the game makers' rules. Empowered by her win, her focus turns to bringing down the Capitol and the frameworks that supports the game makers. So, how might we continue this metaphor when thinking about our Gen Z students? What might we do to empower them and support their revolution? It is essential that we empower our students in this digital ownership conversation as active participants and decision makers. From leading classroom conversations, to presenting at school board meetings, to engaging in statewide policymaking, the opportunities for them to lead the revolution are endless. We can't expect them to develop digital awareness and make their behaviors automatic on their own. And we never expect that our students would develop strategic digital leadership skills without our giving them the space to explore these ideas. While this might seem daunting, they've already shown us that they can do it in so many other arenas. One thing we know is that the skills to achieve digital ownership must be explicitly taught. At the micro level, we can all be doing this in our content areas. There are ways to embed this into your curriculum for authentic study. As an English teacher, I speak to teens' natural righteous indignation and desire to rebel during my Fahrenheit 451 unit. On day one of the unit, I read this great quote by Ray Bradbury. Fahrenheit 451 is not a story about government censorship. It's about being turned into morons by TV. After that, we dive into our study of the essential question: how does technology impact our society? We develop awareness of technology's impact on our daily lives through activities that we do together, like keeping track of how many notifications we get on our phones on the board, talking about what responses that those notifications create for our bodies and our minds. We conduct and share inquiry projects, we read together, we watch films together, and we talk together about technology's impacts. We have frank and honest conversations. It's all the good stuff of English class while focusing on the issues that they face. That's all through my English teacher lens, but I'm confident that we can all find these sorts of paths. Health teachers might tackle how social media impacts our mental health. Science teachers might have students do anything from study the impacts of blue light to look at how technology impacts our neurological systems. Math teachers might have their students create graphs that illustrate the number of devices used in their classrooms or by their families, all the way to analyzing data that's focused on technology use. World language teachers might have their students research how different cultures view and interact with technology. My point is this: all teachers at all grade levels can have conversations about how they use technology and why they use technology, modeling best practices in both arenas.
If you're having a hard time imagining how you might integrate these conversations into your existing curriculum, or if you don't have the time at the moment to refocus your content on tech use, start small. Experiment with short activities and discussions that help students increase their awareness of how they interact with their devices. Anything you do is value added when it comes to helping them take notice of how they're feeling, how they might change their behavior, or how they're being manipulated. The first category of these mini discussion topics falls under the heading of behavioral architecture, which is often defined as the choices you make in the present to influence the behavior of your future self. So what might this look like? First thing you can do is remove as many push notifications as possible. Ask, is this a person? Is that what's notifying me? If not, turn it off. You don't need to know in that moment. Always opt at the beginning of installing an app not to allow notifications. All those categories have to do with the desire on the part of the designers to have you look at your phone as often as possible and to keep looking at it. You might charge your phones downstairs or use a regular alarm clock instead of a phone. You can organize and participate in screen-free events like these, or talk about creating consistent rules for all family members that moms, dads, kids all need to follow so that everyone has the same expectations. And it's pretty remarkable to watch what happens when you begin to apply the same rules to kids and adults. The second category of these opportunities for discussion involves interrogating the features that are built into the phone. And I use features in quotation mark because I mean things like this, the typing awareness indicator. That's there to keep you looking at your phone until the person types. It's not there just to let you know. They want you to not put your phone down in the middle. Or as I call it, the case of the missing clock. So this app on the left is the New York Times game app. You'll see in the upper left-hand corner, the clock is there, but very similar, seemingly innocuous Sudoku, the clock is gone and there's an advertisement on the bottom. The goal being to keep you engaged in their content and to make you forget what time it is so you continue to play. You might also ask students, what led to the advent of screen time as a feature on phones? The answer is a demand from consumers, specifically shareholders in Apple, to change the way in which the programs just allowed endless use with no tracking. It was not a voluntary activity on their part. It was the demand that they change their approach to give parents in particular, but also students themselves, more awareness of how much time they were using their devices. And then you might ask the simple question, is a particular feature of a tech device or an app humane or addictive? Is the intent of the choice being made by that designer to make it more interesting or something that they can put down? Whatever you choose to discuss from this list, the more frequently students pause to talk about their devices instead of using their devices, the more their awareness will become automatic and their use of their devices will become more thoughtful, intentional, creative, and positive. Not to brag, but if you're having a hard time imagining how this might work, I'll leave you with one of my favorite examples of how some conversations I led with students permanently changed their perceptions and behaviors. This came to my attention when a student walked up to me in a restaurant that I was in and said hello. And she said, "Mr. Warner, you have to look at my backpack." And she turned around. She said, "Unzip that pocket." So I did, and her phone was inside. And she said, my friends and I talked after we had that conversation with you, and we all decided that we would keep our phones in our backpacks behind a zipper, so that if we wanted to use them, we'd have to take off our backpack, unzip it, take it out. And that process of making ourselves more aware was really helpful. As I've told Kate, this is one of those moments where you're like, all right, I'm done. My career can end here because I've done what I hope to do. So we've just taken you through some of the ways we can offer citizenship and leadership education integrated into the curriculum, and introduce some of the ways you might offer mini lessons that can stand alone as opportunities to get students thinking about how they interact with tech. But there are also great resources out there if you have the flexibility to try lessons that might take a full class period or even several class periods. As we said, there are countless and often conflicting definitions for what teaching digital citizenship and teaching digital leadership means. But fortunately, along with all those definitions come many well-researched and classroom-tested resources. Some of the best have been created by, full disclosure, MLTI 2.0's digital citizenship partner, Common Sense Education, whose 6-pronged digital citizenship curriculum is, in our estimation, second to none. Likewise, the Center for Humane Technology offers what they call youth toolkits to use with students. And these are the people that created the documentary, The Social Dilemma. And the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard has created the DCRP, or Digital Citizenship Plus resource platform. All three of these contain a wealth of fantastic, immediately actionable ideas and lessons with related supporting materials. And these are all linked in this presentation's resource slide. But for us, what's still missing and why we continue to watch Generation Z struggle is how we might amplify these classroom level conversations and catalyze a long overdue revolution in making digital ownership a widely accepted competency at the district and statewide level. While our goal is for you to leave today with a starting point for making changes in your classrooms, we also want to offer entry points for bringing this conversation back to your schools, back to your school committees, back to your districts, and to your leadership. So we'll just give you a moment to take a look at that model again, and then I want to talk a bit about what you might do as a first step.
So we know it's a lot, and we know that you're already overwhelmed with what's on your plates. You do not have to start the revolution alone, nor can you be expected to. It does take an individual commitment, and you can definitely make a change as a single person or in collaboration with colleagues, but systemic change requires institutional commitment. We have to push back against those who tell us that it's not important or that we're already addressing it, and hold our building, district, and elected officials accountable for creating the space to prioritize digital ownership as a core competency. With that said, you are all here watching this session because you are already looking in the right direction. Trust your instincts on this and use that to help move us all forward. So where might we start? How might we start? We found that it's helpful to end our sessions by sending people out in the world with an immediate and actionable task. So today, we ask that you begin the conversation about digital ownership with your colleagues, administration, and school board. We've created a set of digital protest signs with prompt questions that might help you begin these conversations. As we go through them together, we'd love for you to take pictures of the ones that strike you and then text or email them to your stakeholders as a way to open up dialogue and remind yourself of some of the key points we've discussed. We'll pause for a moment while you pull out your phones, or feel free to use the QR code to pull up today's slides and screenshot them instead if you'd prefer.
So we thought we'd start with the first one, just allowing you to capture the concept of digital ownership as we envision it, and use that as a starting place to share with colleagues.
What would you think of treating digital ownership as a new competency like literacy or computation?
At the district level, where does digital ownership rank as a current priority, and should that ranking be changed?
In terms of classroom priorities, where does digital ownership currently stand? Is that where it belongs?
Who needs to be a part of our conversations about digital ownership, and how do we get them to the table?
If we agree that digital ownership needs to be a higher priority, what does step one look like for us?
What are some creative ways to engage our students in activities focused on digital ownership?
What are some creative ways to bring our students into policy discussions about digital ownership?
And to end where we began, we hope you'll take back a new lens through which to view these conversations, one that flips the paradigm from punishment or blame to empowerment and empathy. We hope you're leaving today with that approach. And as I said at the beginning, we'd love to talk further about this and hope you'll reach out if we can be helpful in any way. Thanks so much for joining us.